The most striking truth about microagreement engineering is that the most absolute form of submission isn't born from a single massive surrender, it is built through 1,000 invisible yeses. We generally assume that people are forced into big decisions through overt pressure, but in high-pressure dynamics, your own biological need for consistency is used to lead you into a cage made of your own words.
Just think about that for a second. It's not one giant decision. It's a series of tiny, almost meaningless agreements. Each one is like a single, light thread. But when you get 1,000 of them wrapped around you, well, they form a cable. It's the subtle architecture of compliance, and it's built so carefully that you often don't even realize you're trapped until you try to move in a direction you haven't been led.
And this gets to the very heart of the paradox of the yes ladder. It's a dynamic where your own desire to be logical and reliable gets turned into the very mechanism of your own entrapment. So how does this actually happen? And maybe more importantly, how can we develop the awareness to see it coming and reclaim our own agency? Okay, let's dive in.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start by really understanding the framework, what we're calling the cage of your words. Then we'll pop the hood and look at the momentum machine. We'll dissect the anatomy of the yes ladder, explore the biology of compliance that makes it all work, and then the important part, we'll learn how to reclaim your no and really harness the power of dissent.
First things first, it's really crucial to frame this the right way. What we're doing here is exploring a framework to understand certain patterns in communication. This isn't about diagnosing anyone's intent. It's about recognizing a really powerful psychological phenomenon, how the human brain can be nudged gently into misinterpreting engineered momentum as if it were a voluntary commitment. It's the difference between truly agreeing with something and just being carried along by the current of a conversation, unable to find the shore.
So let's get into the architecture of this thing, this momentum machine. How is that momentum actually built? Well, it's not magic, it's a well-understood process, and it's based on some very predictable parts of human psychology. At its core, there are 3 key concepts that work together to create this powerful engine of compliance, one that pretty much runs on our own desire for social harmony. Okay, the main mechanism is called sequential priming. This is the fancy term for creating what's known as a yes set. You've seen this before. Think of a salesperson who asks, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" You say yes. Then, and you'd agree it's important to protect your family, right? Yes again. Each agreement is small, it's easy, it's obvious, but what's really happening under the surface is that your brain is being primed. It's logging a pattern of agreement, and it starts to anticipate the next yes, which makes it cognitively easier to just keep the sequence going than it is to stop it.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because this is how it hooks into our own self-perception. This is the consistency hook. Look, we all have this deep-seated need to see ourselves as consistent, rational people. Once we've said yes a few times, a little voice in our head pipes up and tells us that changing course now would make us seem flaky or contradictory. It feels like we've signed some kind of invisible social contract, and breaking it feels like a failure of our own integrity. We're not just complying with the other person anymore, we're complying with our own self-image.
And all of this leads to the third piece of the puzzle, rationalization fatigue. Constantly evaluating, questioning, pushing back, that takes mental energy, a lot of it. After a series of these rapid-fire agreements in, say, a negotiation or a high-pressure sales pitch, your brain just gets tired. It becomes socially and cognitively exhausted. And at that point, it just feels so much easier to keep agreeing, to maintain that smooth rhythm of the interaction, than it does to summon the energy to stop, reevaluate, and maybe create some friction by saying no.
So you see the shift here. This is the crucial point. It's a transition from a state of active agency, where you are firmly in the driver's seat evaluating each request on its own merit, to a state of passive momentum. And in this state, your judgment isn't entirely your own anymore. It's been outsourced to the flow of the conversation. You're no longer asking, "Is this right for me?" You're just trying to keep the social gears turning smoothly, and in this context, that means you just keep saying yes.
Okay, so we get the psychological principles. Now let's look at the actual tactics, the step-by-step process. How is a yes ladder actually put together in a real conversation? It's a very systematic pattern, and I promise you, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
It really unfolds in 3 distinct stages. First, you have the low-stakes anchor, which sets the foundation. Second, you have the yes ladder, which starts to build behavioral commitment right on top of that foundation. And third, the whole process culminates in what's called identity locking, and that's where the system becomes self-enforcing, where it can feel psychologically painful to say no. Let's break each of those down.
So step 1 is all about creating that initial foundation of agreement.
The person leading the conversation will ask these questions with super obvious yes answers. You'd agree that providing for your family is important, right? When you say having more freedom is a good thing? I mean, these aren't really questions, are they? They're statements disguised as questions. Answering yes is effortless. This kicks off something called the reciprocity reflex, this feeling that since this person agrees with you on the big stuff, you should probably agree with them. It creates a powerful and often totally false sense of being on the same page.
And here is where the ladder really starts getting built. The process makes a critical shift from these abstract agreements to small, concrete, low-cost actions. So after you've agreed that financial freedom is important, the very next step might be, great, just click this link to see how. Or just jot down your email here for more info. See what's happening? You are no longer just saying yes, you are now doing yes. You're stacking these tiny behavioral commitments on top of your verbal ones, and it makes each step up the ladder feel totally insignificant, even while you're climbing higher and higher into their frame.
And this brings us to the final and frankly most insidious stage, identity locking. After a whole history of saying and doing yes, your brain just starts to automate the process. Disagreement starts to feel psychologically stressful, like it's a threat to the rapport that you've built. Individuals caught in these dynamics sometimes report that they stop even noticing when a yes starts to hurt their own interests. Their brain has been conditioned to equate agreement with safety and disagreement with social danger. At this point, their own sense of integrity, that becomes the leash.
So why is this process so powerful? Why does it work so consistently? The answer isn't some weakness of character, it's actually a feature of our biology. There are these really deep-seated psychological drivers that make all of us vulnerable to this kind of engineering. So if our own biology is working against us, what hope do we have? Well, the first step is to really understand the engine of the machine.
This contrast right here really gets to the heart of the dynamic. On one side, the goal is often zero-resistance submission, to get leverage without having to engage in a logical debate, because momentum is just so much more powerful than reason. And on the other side is our own vulnerability, which is often a positive trait that gets twisted into a weakness, that deep human need for social reliability. So many of us are conditioned to value being dependable and being consistent more than we value our own freedom in that one specific moment.
The core biological driver behind all of this is something called cognitive dissonance avoidance. We experience genuine, measurable psychological pain when our actions contradict our stated beliefs. It feels awful to think of ourselves as hypocrites. The yes ladder is perfectly designed to exploit this. To say no after a string of yeses creates a massive spike of cognitive dissonance. And to avoid that jarring, painful feeling, our brain will do almost anything, including agreeing to something we know deep down isn't right for us.
Okay, we've dissected the trap, we get the mechanism, we get the biology. Now for the most important part. How do we reclaim our no? How do we install this circuit breakers that can stop this process dead in its tracks? The key isn't to become cynical or disagreeable, it's simply to become more aware of our own internal state.
The first tool is something we can call a yes-no pulse audit. It's a simple internal check-in. As you're in a conversation, just pause and ask yourself, how does this interaction feel? Does this agreement feel expansive? Like a genuine meeting of minds that opens up possibilities and makes you feel more resourceful? Or does it feel narrowed, like your options are shrinking, the walls are closing in, and you're being led down one single inevitable path? That feeling of being cornered is a huge red flag that you might be experiencing engineered priming, not authentic agreement.
And building on that is circuit breaker awareness. This is all about taking a small, decisive action to break the spell. First, learn to recognize that consistency hook the moment you feel it, that internal pressure to not contradict yourself. Then, intentionally say no to a very small, totally meaningless request. It could be as simple as, no thanks, I'm good without a brochure, or actually, let me think about that for a second. This simple act does something really profound. It proves to your own brain that you can break the sequence. It's this tiny act of rebellion that shatters the passive momentum and immediately reestablishes your analytical sovereignty.
Ultimately, the core principle for dismantling this trap is giving yourself permission to do the one thing the consistency hook tells you not to. This affirmation is the master key. I am allowed to change my mind. Your past yes does not obligate your future yes. You are always free to reevaluate. This isn't being inconsistent, this is being intelligently adaptive. True consistency isn't about sticking to every minor statement you've ever made, it's about staying consistent with your core values and your own well-being.
So let's bring this all together. Microagreement engineering teaches us that the most dangerous cages
aren't made of steel bars, but of our own words and our own desire for social harmony. Your autonomy, your freedom within any interaction, is therefore fundamentally tied to your ability and your willingness to dissent.
So the ultimate solution is to regain control of the rhythm. The moment you feel that pull of passive momentum, you have to intentionally break the sequence. Pause, ask a question that changes the subject, anything.
That simple interruption stops the ladder from being built. It reminds your brain that you don't have to take that next small step. The entire structure is incredibly fragile. It relies on your uninterrupted ascent.
So, say no. It might feel uncomfortable. Your brain might scream at you about cognitive dissonance and breaking the flow, but that single act reclaims your power in the dynamic completely. It cuts the strings of compliance and allows you to stand on your own ground again.
Because here is the final crucial takeaway. Your yes is only powerful if you are also fully capable of saying no. If no is not an option for you, then your yes is not a choice. It's a submission. Your no is not an act of negativity. It is the ultimate act of authenticity. It is the only thing that proves your yes has any value at all.